Hello there, I'm Sikta. Welcome to my podcast, My Best Life, where I talk to different people from all walks of life from all around the world and understand from them how they are going about putting the pieces together to build the best version of life for themselves. Pick up all that resonates with you and pick up only what resonates with you. Also, May being the Mental Health Awareness Month, this video is dedicated to missionsavealife.org. See you on the other side of the podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night if you're going to bed after seeing this video. And thank you so much for making to the very first episode of my podcast series, The Best Life. And I could not have been more lucky than the guest whom I'm welcoming in the very first video. Please welcome Mr. Constantin Bogdan Morun. He is someone who coaches people. He has his 104th podcast that has just released this week. And he is also a tech strategist with the Microsoft. And there are many other businesses that he's building. And he spends his time with his lovely two dogs. So we will understand more about how he finds time for all this and more. And how does he create time? So, with that, welcome again, Constantin. How are you doing?
Thank you, Sikta. Beautiful introduction. I'm excellent. I'm having a conversation with you right now. The sun is shining, as you can see behind me, and it's a beautiful day.
How do you define yourself? These are some definitions that I told you based on how the external world perceives you. And to be honest, how your LinkedIn profile shows you. But when we look at ourselves as a third person versus when we look at ourselves as ourselves, sometimes the perception is different. Walk us through your perception of you.
Yeah, I love that question to kick us off. We say that is such a beautiful, beautiful way to look at life, meaning that you want to go below the surface, below what you might identify within your current situation, be it your job, be it your role in life as a father or mother or daughter or son. And for the longest time, I also identified myself with all those external things, right? Like, what's my title on LinkedIn? What's my job? What's my role in life? The way I see myself right now is that I am a person that's here to shine his light and inspire and empower others to do the same. And what that means to me, shining my light means to be vulnerable, to be authentic, to be me in every single scenario. And that's what you get. If we have a recording like we do right now, if we have a conversation, if I'm at work, if I'm coaching someone, that's the same person you're going to see. So there's going to be no surprise, no multiple personalities anymore.
Wow, that's a lovely thing. No matter what you do, it's the same person that you see. And you also talked about shine through everything that you do in life. These are
Yes.
not things that come until and unless someone has had some life experiences. Could you walk us through your journey of life?
Yeah, there's many parts to it. We'll start with, I guess, what got us today here, right now. Right, about 3 years ago, 2021, coming out of the pandemic, like you and everyone else listening, it wasn't easy. And I was identifying myself with my work a lot. I was still at Microsoft back then in a different role, a role enabling customers to work from home. So it's a very fulfilling role because I was impacting the ability of someone to continue earning while the pandemic was going on, right? And to be with their loved ones. But I was working a lot of hours, 60 plus hours a week, working weekends at times, and my identity was my work, which meant that outside of work, all I did was distractions to keep my mind away from all the feelings I was feeling and emotions I was that were coming up and I wasn't dealing with, right? And 2021 was the year where I finally realized that my own mental health, my own emotional health, my own physical health were very, very important to me, but I was ignoring them because I was so focused on my work identity. However, because with the pandemic, especially here in Canada where I'm at, the borders were still closed. I couldn't necessarily just say, hey, I'm going to start traveling and I'm going to do things. But I could start preparing. So what I did is I started looking at things I can do to essentially go away and recharge my batteries, so to speak, and perhaps reflect on life and see what direction I want to go in. And the place I stumbled upon was a place in Ecuador, a beautiful retreat in the Andes Mountains, 10,000 feet up, in one of the most gorgeous nature pieces I've ever seen. And I said, you know what, I need to go there, right? And I booked something for, I don't know, like 7, 8 months in advance to make sure the borders are open. And that happened to be April of 2022. So about 2 years to the date. And that was the first catalyst to my transformation, because on that journey, which included plant medicine, is something I've never tried before. It opened up everything for me, Sikta, and essentially catalyzed my transformation. So you know how when you stumble in life upon something that when you look back, you're like, oh wow, that was the beginning of something magical. Well, this was for me. That entire period, 8 months of preparing was my pivotal moment.
Wow. The turning points in life never look like turning points when they're happening. Either they look very painful or very, very jolly go round. At least in my experience,
Yeah,
that's
you're
how it
absolutely
has
right.
been. Either I'm just flowing through it or I'm struggling a lot with it. Yet those are the moments that define me or redefine me sometimes. So
Yes.
I know when we were discussing about the podcast, it had come up that you are someone who doesn't take things status quo as status quo. You always have
Yes.
question. So how did this journey? Someone who's already self-aware in many ways. That's how I treat it. Um, and you still knew at that time that you're making a big impact through the pandemic by helping folks, though it is
Correct. Yes.
something that's draining you, that's just maybe burning you out in many ways, which happens to so many of us in tech and in other professions today. You still knew the value you were creating. A very self-aware person is what I see. What are the cycles that a so-called deep and self-aware person also goes through, and how did you deepen your experience still further?
I love the question, Sikta. And I would say that I am definitely a lot more self aware these days than I used to be in the past. And self awareness and awareness in general ends up being, the way I see it, an illusion often. Because the way I see it again, our ego and our mind or our brains don't want us to change, because change is scary. Change can jeopardize your ability to stay alive, right? So everything that you have built within you physiologically is trying to prevent you from making changes, because again, change is scary. And if you look historically, anything 70 years or earlier, it was very dangerous to be out there, which meant any type of new big change would be very scary. So then it's very good at making you think you're self-aware, making you think you have awareness of the situation. But what we know from science is that 95% of your actions, which are led by your thoughts and beliefs first, 95% of them are done at the subconscious level.
Wow.
So when you take an action, there's a chance that 19 out of 20 actions you take are driven. So you're not conscious about it. And you can see some simple examples in your life, right? I mean, you're not the one in charge of pumping the blood from your heart into your body, right? That's your subconscious mind taking care of all of it. Now, your subconscious mind also doesn't sleep, which is something that most people don't realize, which means that it absorbs everything that's going on. So if you sleep in a room where the TV is running, or if you sleep in a room where your parents or siblings or others are having conversations, you absorb all of that, and that becomes part of your programming, so to speak, right? And if you're technical like me, because I have a technical background, mathematics, computer science, engineering, I like to think of our body as your hardware, right? This is your device, like a cell phone. And then everything that's below the surface, the spiritual stuff, but also your thoughts and beliefs and your emotions and feelings, that's your software, right? That's the stuff that runs the program, right? So we all have the same hardware for the most part, but where we have a big difference in ourselves is that software, the thoughts and beliefs, the feelings and emotions that get triggered by it. All the good stuff is unique to each individual. Which the reason I mentioned that is because I was no different than Russ. I felt unique, but yet I felt like I was alone. Right. So then, yes, our self aware was making a difference, but at the same time, I was like, well, nobody else must be going through what I'm going, because I'm a
Oh,
unique being. Not realizing that, of course, because we have the same hardware, a lot of us go through the same things all the time. So, to go back to your question really quick here, how do I go from someone that's somewhat self-aware, challenging the status quo, but looking externally way too much, to someone that now brings things internally and can become more self-aware. It's through the power of curiosity and self-introspection. Meaning that a way to stay distracted, and most of us are, unfortunately, you pick up your device whenever there's a moment of silence. You always listen to others instead of listening to your own voices. You never give yourself time to meditate or go into reflection and ponder questions. Could be big questions around life, could be simple questions around, why did I think that way, or why did I believe that way, right? Never challenging ourselves. And I would say that when you start doing that just a bit, you'll start to become more self-aware, and then all of a sudden you start to get power back into your life, and the power of choice makes its way into your life. Because once you become aware of something that you're not in agreement with, which is can be many things, like in my life, then you have the power of choice. Do I do something about it or not? And if you choose to do something about it, that's when it gets scary, because you're like, well, what can I do? Right? And then you can go searching, or your ego, your mind pulls you back because change is scary.
I love the way you put it, and there were so many points in it. So, if you give me a chance, I'll just
Of
summarize
course.
some things that I noticed. Um, 95% of the time, we act before we make a choice. It's almost by habit that we act. So, and there are more than like, just as you were mentioning, even if I'm sleeping in a room, and yet I'm absorbing everything that is being told by
Correct.
the television and everyone in the room. I have a friend who sleeps, and when she wakes up, she remembers all the conversations that have happened in her surrounding. She can narrate
That's
it to
why.
us. So yeah, I mean, and she hasn't done it consciously. Sometimes she wishes that she doesn't do it. But yeah, I mean, we feel it's a superpower. She feels it's currently something that disturbs her sleep.
If I could add something there, so it is a superpower for her, because somehow she was able to develop, maybe that's her gift, but also maybe she developed a way to connect to her subconscious in a different way to pull that information out, because all of us have that ability. It's just that, think of anything in your subconscious mind, it's stored like in a database. So if you want to pull something out, it's based on what you tell yourself, what you focus on. So if, let's say, I have a thought that I'm not good enough, what's going to happen? Your conscious mind is going to send a signal to your subconscious mind and be like, well, give me proof of this, right? Like, he's thinking he's not good enough. We got to give him what he's thinking. And then he goes looking for it, right? So if you can do it automatically, there's ways in which you can deliberately pull up information, pull up, thoughts and beliefs, break them down, replace them, rewire them, right? Neuroscience, and especially neuroplasticity, has shown us that we can rewire our brain in so many different ways, and this is just one example of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Totally with you. We can actually rewire our brain in so many ways. And our conscious takes around 20,000 information points at a given moment, whereas the subconscious actually has gathered 400,000 points. So
Oh
we
yeah, it's so true.
actually have so much of a choice. It's literally 5% of the entire gamut. So, of course, we are doing 95% of the work manually, or I mean, subconsciously,
Automatically.
not manually, automatically, just the opposite. But every moment we can choose to change what those 20,000 points are, is what I have tried to tell my brain to start its rewiring. But yeah, that was one of the points that came across. I loved your analogy of the human to the hardware as the physical body and the software which is running within. Till both are not in sync, you will have anomalies in the mobile phone. So
Exactly. And
absolutely.
the other example you can look at, Sikta, is like, if I'm right, I'm a Windows guy because I work for Microsoft, but right now I'm running Windows 11, right, on a fairly good hardware machine to record this podcast. But
Oh
what if
wow.
I was running Windows 98, right? Some
Yes.
people still run Windows 98. How about, Windows 4 or whatever other Windows version you want? But how about if you look at your phone, right? If everyone picks up their phone and looks at the phone right now, you likely have what? At least 100 apps on your phone. On average, it's about 100. Now, think about those apps. How many of them do you keep up to date to be able to run them? And if you have a setting that does it automatically, great, but most of us don't. And
Yes.
when I look at mine, sometimes like, oh, I haven't updated this in a year or two, and I haven't used it in a year or two, and then I try to go use it, and if it's still outdated, it's probably not going to work on my hardware. So the way I see it is, if we have software aspects of us that are outdated and we haven't actually looked at them in decades for most of us, then how can we expect that they're there to serve us to their fullest ability if we haven't changed them, if we haven't updated them? So when I became aware of that, that's when it gave me the power to be like, well, it's time for me to become aware of some of these patterns that are no longer serving me. They served me at some point in time because they're there for a reason, but now they're not serving me, so let's change them.
Totally with you on that. And this hardware software being in sync, this moment is not only enough, it needs to be in sync all through the cycle. And just as the world changes, I think that's where we are facing more of a challenge. And that's where what inspired me to even create the channel that we have, that the
Yeah.
changes now have accelerated. The upgrades are required much faster. Being in sync with the world is required much faster. I believe similar was your realization in your own way when you realize that you're not alone in the journey. What you're going through is not only what you are feeling, because you did talk about feeling that since I'm the special person, maybe because all of us are in many ways special. That's true. But then in our basic structure and basic feelings as human, we are similar. We even across the cultures we are similar. So that's the beauty of being human being. And was that the inspiration behind your coaching and podcast? Walk us through that journey a bit.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely part of it. And thank you for asking. What I come to realize a bit later in my life is that everything I've done in my life has been revolving around learning something or coming up with something new and then being excited to share it with other people. So I've been a math tutor and a science tutor since I was like 7, 8 years old. And
Wow.
then since that point, I've been in a mentorship or coaching capacity all my life. There was no break, meaning that from the sciences, I was a tutor all of from first grade all the way up to university and beyond. Then I was a soccer coach for most of my life. Then I had a stint as an e-gamer, like a pro. You can call it a pro e-gamer. I was
Wow.
coaching there as well. I played poker professionally for a long time and ended up coaching and mentoring people and doing a lot of content for like a decade throughout my in my 20s and early 30s, right? And then when I joined the workforce in the corporate world at Microsoft and before, I've always been a mentor, always taking on people that would join in or people that were, a couple of steps behind me, and I would help them on the path, a mentor. And then as I was going through my transformation over the last few years, people kept coming up to me and they're like, hey, Constantin, how did you go from a place where, overwhelmed, busy, stressed, burnt out, depressed, anxious to this place where you are now in such a short amount of time? Because most people couldn't grasp how I could go from one place to the next, like such a big difference, while still being employed at Microsoft, while still doing so many things in my life. And that really got me thinking, I had to go inwards and see, well, what were the big changes I made? Because I made a lot of changes. Some were better than others. And then the same people, and then other people came in and said, well, you've done some amazing things. Can you show us how, right? So I was like, okay, sure. Let me see if I can put a program together and I'll try it out with some people. This was back in the summer to fall of last year.
Okay.
And I started to run people through what I thought was a good system, my system, and I started to see amazing results in the people really quickly. And I'm like, okay, maybe I have something here. So the more I tested my methodologies with myself and my system with myself and with them, the more it built the self confidence and the trust that, what, this is likely the path I should be pursuing. And it was in line with my mission or my why or my purpose, because that's one of the first things I did at the beginning of my journey. And what I uncovered back then, it evolved slightly over time, but it's very simple. And I mentioned it earlier as well. It's to inspire and empower people on this journey so they too can find joy, fulfillment, abundance, success in life, and shine their light to make the world a better place for all of us. Right? So if you look at my why, it's perfectly in line with the coaching and it makes sense now. I'm like, yeah. I thought it was through the podcast first because I have a podcast too, right? And that's how I started. And then it evolved to the coaching aspect because if I can inspire or empower someone on their journey, that's when I feel the most joy and most fulfillment, which means that I should be doing as much of it as I can possibly do.
You put it really beautifully, Constantin. So basically, being a coach, being a mentor has been your second nature all through life.
Yes.
And you were doing many things right. You were realizing that you're doing it right. Others also saw the change. And when you reflected back on it, is when you created your coaching course, and that
Mhm.
clicked.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. Exactly. And you said something actually very beautiful at the beginning as well, which is the idea that sometimes when you're in the middle of something, you don't realize where you actually are and how far you've come and how much progress you've made, or the other way around, how stuck you are, how you've been repeating the patterns over and over and you haven't seen any positive changes, right? Either way, you guess you're in the middle. And there's an English saying that goes something like this: you cannot see the forest for the trees, right? Because if you're in the middle of the forest, you don't see a forest, you just see a bunch of trees, right? So, like, you need to pull yourself out to be able to look from a different point of view, or like I've seen right now, you want to have someone in your corner or someone's in your corner that can see it from different vantage points and tell you, hey, you're missing this or you haven't considered this. And that's why I was talking to a friend yesterday and I said, I do not see a scenario in which I personally do not have at least one coach in my life that I pay for. And right now, to give you an idea, Sikta, since I've been on this journey, I've had multiple coaches at any given time. Right now, I have, let me see here, 5 different coaches or coaching groups I'm working with.
wow.
Business coach, right? 2 different sets, spiritual coach, 2 different sets of spiritual coaches, right? They're all complementary and they all help me in different ways. Now, I'm not saying that everyone needs to have 4 or 5 different coaches, but at least one can help you significantly to accelerate further and faster on your path. Because if you think about a sports analogy here really quick. I'm a big, big soccer or football fan, right? And if you look at the modern teams right now, right? I mean, they had coaches the entire existence of professional sports as far as it goes back. But more right now is that, let's say a professional athlete, a professional soccer player will have a coach for their defensive game, a coach for their offensive game, a coach for their dribbling, a coach for their control and technique, a coach perhaps for their mental health, right? So they could be a therapist or a psychologist or an actual coach. So all of a sudden, when, someone for weights, and all of a sudden you go and see that an athlete, someone that wants to be at the top of their game, will have 5 to 20 people specialize in something that will help them on their path. Now, and then there's the coach of the team who's special, is more like a person to bring everything together. So if you look at your life, I'm not saying you need to be an athlete or you have to be like an athlete, but you just look at the examples in your life and see, okay, those people are at the height of the best level possible. If I want to be at my best level, I cannot do it alone. I need to surround myself with people that will empower me to get to the next level. And some will be mentors through your work, through your communities, and you don't pay them anything. It's just a beautiful exchange. Some will have to be coaches that you pay for because you cannot seem to find that skill set in your mentorship community.
That makes sense. And yes, if you want to really realize your full potential, it has to be multidimensional.
Mhm.
You need to know which dimensions of yourself you want to unlock. For example, a soccer player may not go for a coaching for maybe speaking French very fluently, may not be applicable. Not that it's not a great skill, but doesn't come in his or her calling. I get what you're saying, and what my journey as a coach has taught me is you bring in those perspectives as a coach, which your mind doesn't grasp immediately when you are in the situation. It is not something that you cannot do. No, you can do. But at a given point in time, you're at one point in your physical body and you're looking at things, especially if you're focusing, which you need to do well. You're focusing on something and getting things done. Someone else looking at it could see the beautiful forest instead of the one tree that you're holding on to, and that you can walk through it and you'll be crossing the entire forest together. So yeah,
Exactly.
so you do need those people in your life, and even a coach needs a coach. You're a perfect example of that.
Exactly. And my coaches have coaches their own, right? And it's like it's a cycle in the sense that, again, I know the word coach gets a bad rep. I don't necessarily call myself a coach per se. I'm just someone that inspires and empowers people. And I happen to specialize in a few things. So I can put people through a system and get them from point A to point B, right? Which, and you mentioned that in the introduction, right? From a place of being too busy, overwhelmed, stressed, depressed, anxious, burnt out, to a place where they can achieve more, stress less, and create time for what they love, right? And that's really, if you look at your own life, find whatever it is that you're great at and start doing more of it. And don't worry about the labels that other put on you. It's the labels that you put on yourself, right? And hopefully they're your own labels and not by someone else's definition.
Perfect. How do you create time? And why don't you walk us through your coaching process also?
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Sikta. So I love I love both questions so much. So we'll start with the creating time first, and then we'll jump into the my system and how the system helps you create time. But to understand time for a second, let's actually take a look at something that's, of course, everyone knows. And you know that there's 24 hours in a day. I have 24 hours, you have 24 hours. But then you also know that you look at people around you, and some people seem to be able to use their 24 hours 10 times more efficiently than most other people. And then it makes you wonder, like, what am I doing wrong, or what's their secret? Oh, they must be rich, they must have the connections, they must have something I don't have. The reality is that likely those people have been able to stumble upon a system themselves or come up with one that allows them to create time where time doesn't seem to exist, or time is lost. So I'll give you a couple of examples of where one could lose time without realizing it, and then also the same scenario where someone can create the time for themselves. So you and I both work in the corporate world, right? Which means that we have to send out a lot of emails, right? Sikta, let me ask you this. When you type an email, has it ever happened to you that you type up the email, 30 seconds to a minute, but then you spend minutes going over it again
Oh boy,
and
so
again?
many times. So many
Okay,
times. Three lines written, but I'm wondering, should I send? Have I made a grammar mistake, or is this tone okay? Will it be okay? I mean, yes, I'm
yes.
guilty of it.
Everyone in
30
the
seconds,
audience will.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so what happened there? A task that takes 30 seconds took you 5 minutes. That's a delta of 4.5 minutes between them. How many emails do we send on average in a day? Let's say
Mm,
20, right? Because it could be a lot more,
I was about to
right?
say 50 because I'm in sales job. So, yeah.
Exactly, right? Because as I said, but let's keep it smaller, because when we look at examples, and the way I look at it, I don't want to exaggerate them, because of course, then you and others will be like, well, that's not my case. So let's be actually optimistic on, we don't send that many emails, send 20 emails. Okay. So you spend an extra 4.5 minutes per email on average, multiply that by 20, right? That's 80 minutes just from the 4 minutes. The other half is another 10 minutes. So that's 90 minutes you spent extra on just the emails in a day, 90 minutes, okay? That's an hour and a half of your time spent extra on these emails. Now, how does it manifest in someone's life? Well, they might be thinking, wait, I'm way too busy, right? So now I have to stay an extra hour at work. Or I'm too stressed because, emails take me 90 minutes a day, possibly more. If you have 50, multiply the number, right? 50 means 2.5 times more than the 20, right? So that's like 180 plus 45, 225 minutes. That's almost 4 hours.
Almost half of my day.
Yes, half of your working day.
And then there is LinkedIn and SMS also. Huh? All these also come in.
Yeah, because we haven't talked about your personal life. When you have to send a text to your boyfriend or girlfriend, when you have to send a text to your parents or an email or something, it doesn't happen as often when you're on the phone, right? But still can happen on the phone too. But let's stick to the email, right? Let's say on average you lose 90 minutes a day, and let's say you work 5 days a week, right? So you lost what? An hour and a half times five. You lost 7.5 hours in a
Oh
week.
boy.
Now, you can see them as not lost, you can see them as spent, right? Because you've spent them. You spend the hours because that's how you do things. Now, that's one task. How about, I'll give you another example, Sikta. You're in a meeting with your manager, right? And it happens to be Thursday at 4 o'clock, right before you go home. And you thought that the meeting is going to go great, but he or she says something that you didn't realize upset you in a way. And you leave the meeting and you feel a bit down. and you may feel a bit less than. Maybe you start to be upset with yourself and be like, I wish I would have said that, or I wish I would have done this, right? Something that happens to most of us. What happens then? Well, maybe you had plans to go home and go out to dinner on a date night. Maybe you had plans to go home, read a book, and meditate. Maybe you had plans to go home, take the dogs for a walk, enjoy a nice dinner, and then watch a movie that you've been waiting for. But because of what just happened at work, and now you start ruminating on it, right? Because it's happening subconsciously. A thought leads to a feeling, an emotion, which repeats the cycle, and then it leads to an action, an outcome. You get home, and by the time you get home through traffic and all of that, or taking the tube or whatever it is that you do to get home, it's run so much in your mind, and now you're feeling a certain way. You're feeling down.
So true.
Some of the anxiety comes up, and what happens next? You and I both know those plans that you had, those things that you were going to do for yourself, and all those great things likely go out the window. If they don't go out the window, what happens? You go out on the walk with your dogs, and you're more miserable now. You can't be in the moment. Someone cuts you off or something. You may not say hi. You may get pissed off as you go out on a date, and you're not your best self. Now, you may not see a connection with time here, but there is one, because what does time give you? Time gives you access to people, to experiences, to everything else,
Yes.
right? So in this example, if I'm still going on a date with you, despite feeling less than, how am I using my time? Am I using my time efficiently? Am I giving you the best time possible? Right? And the answer to that is pretty clear for all of us, right? So we start to realize that not only are we losing time in certain scenarios, and in this case, if I decide to not do any of my plans because I was upset, I lost time again. Or if we do use the time, we use it very, very inefficiently. So when you look at my program, the name I came up with it is Peak Performance Without Pressure. Because for me, if I look at my life, it's not that I want to be the best at everything. But I know that if I'm in peak performance, meaning I'm at the top of my game, then I can show up at my best in every aspect of my life. It's not about my work only. It's not about my mental health only or my physical health or emotion. It's about everything holistically. And you use that word at the beginning, which is so, so important. Right? So it's about getting into a state where external things or the environment doesn't trigger you into a sequence that's detrimental to your well-being, whatever that detrimental might look like for you.
That's the choice. That's when you have the choice. Otherwise, everyone else is making the choice for you. If you're getting
Which,
triggered, it's someone else's choice.
but keep in mind, 95% of the time, you get triggered, you react without even thinking about it, and now all of a sudden the choices are made for you, right? And then that's the power of what we're going to talk about in a second, of how you take control back and you start living a life on your terms. Now, it's never going to be perfect. It's not like I'm saying, okay, so you spend 90 minutes extra a day on those emails. By following this system, you're going to get back all 90 minutes. That's unrealistic, because at the end of the day, you cannot not be human. We're still going to be human. Nothing is perfect, which means that there are days that are still going to be worse. But the idea is to be able to bounce back from a bad day quicker. The idea is to be able to recover from an interaction quicker if it's not satisfactory. The idea is to catch yourself in the act more often and be able to do something with it, have more choices, to your point, right?
How, like, I'm guilty of both the scenarios that you talked about. How would you ask me to, or someone in our audience who relates to similar experience, to catch ourselves in the scenario? I was even talking to our common friend Jen, who's writing the book about catch yourself in the act.
Exactly,
So
yeah.
yeah, so how does one do that? Walk us through your very high level how your coaching practice
Yeah, so
really
I'll
brings
tell you
this
my
into you.
system really quick, and then we'll come back to your question, because that will clarify a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Usually what I have found is that when you lose time or time seems to be disappearing, it's because you're likely suffering of a few things, or one of the few things, meaning your foundation, so what you've built everything on, has some components that are not sustaining the building you're building on top. And I'll explain what the foundation is in a minute. And the second part of that, I said that there's a few things. There's a couple that I'll combine here. It's getting very clear on something very important here, which is what? It's essentially your why. Why do you do things, right? Your purpose, your mission in life, but also what you're really good at, your gifts and your strengths, And then also the challenges that hold you down at times. So that those are fears or symptoms like imposter syndrome and self-doubt, which by the way, that those two, imposter syndrome and self-doubt, is one of the reasons, two of the reasons why emails take longer to write. But anyway, so those two
And
are the
high
critical
achievers
aspects.
will be more prone to it.
Oh, absolutely, right? Because high achievers means you're pushing yourself up the ladder. You're always going to be one step ahead, which means you're going to be in environments where you're going to be challenged, right? So whenever you get challenged, anything, if you don't have strong self-confidence and someone picks at the self-confidence, then imposter syndrome kicks in, self-doubt, all that beautiful stuff, right? So if you look at my system, there are 5 steps to it. First step is the one that most people skip or are not even aware of it, and it's the most important step. And it's that the step of fortifying your foundation. Your foundation is your psychology, your thoughts and beliefs about yourself, others, and the world. Now, you asked me the question, how do we become aware of our thoughts? Well, that's one of the first steps, and I'll dive into that in a second. But when I'm talking about your foundation, I'm talking about, let's look at your life and see what are the biggest fires right now. Like, what's something that's going on that's likely impacting every aspect of your life? Meaning that perhaps you lack self-confidence. Perhaps you do suffer from overwhelm and stress and burnout and procrastination, all those things. You identify those things and you can go after them and fix them really quickly once you know what to look for. And that's the first step. As we start to fortify the foundation, this is an ongoing process for life. Like an onion, you're going to peel back the layers over and over again. Then you get to the clarifying stage. It's clarifying and shaping your why. Okay? And then clarifying and shaping your why means what? We start to look at the stories of your life and understand who is Sikta below the surface level, below the indoctrination, below all the stories of everyone else in your life. Okay? And then as we do that, step 3 starts to show itself, which is your gifts and strengths. And step 3 for me is about amplifying your gifts and strengths, because you see, in psychology, they have proven, and there are many studies on this, that if you and I, Sikta, are put in a room and you are to focus on your weaknesses to improve them, and I'm focusing on my strengths and gifts to double down on them, improve that, and bring more of that to the world, I will have a significantly larger ROI on my time spent on that than you will have. Right? But many of us are taught or told, oh, you're not the best at this yet, gotta focus on it, instead of focusing on what you are already good at and what your gifts are. And your gifts, by the way, are unique to you. Your strengths are your abilities that you've developed over time. Okay, and the next step after that, so step number 4, after, so, you have your foundation, it's being fortified, you're getting clear on your why, you're amplifying your gifts and strengths. It's about building, or I should say building, it's designing or redesigning your vision. And I call it a dynamic vision because it's something that always evolves with you. Because now you got clarity. Now you have an identity. You know who you are. You're not your job. You're not your relationship. You are you, the unique being that you are. So now that you have those steps, now you can build a vision, design it. And the last part, the last step is shining your light, executing with excellence, meaning that now you take everything and you start implementing what's happening, or sorry, what's in your vision. And as you do that, your ego and other limiting beliefs and thought patterns come up and try to slow it down or prevent you from progressing. And that's why it's so important to not ignore the last step, which is integrating everything you know and being able to continue taking layer upon layer down and building your strong house on top of your beautiful foundation. So that's the system. Now, why does it create time? Because if we look at the example of the email, right? We know that the reason you are spending more time on your email is because you have some thoughts and beliefs about it, right? Likely you know that, well, I'm checking this because I'm not sure if I should say it one way or another. You mentioned that at the beginning, right?
My identity in both the cases, and I realized it when you put it forth, my identity as a person is what I'm actually afraid of, whether or I'm trying to recheck. When I'm looking at the email again and again, I'm trying to make sure that I don't put myself down or I don't put myself too strongly or whatever is going on in my mind. But again,
Mm-hmm.
how others identify me, or if my boss said something which stayed in my mind for longer, or some colleague said something, friend said something, and impacted other things. Again, I had certain perception of my identity for them, and I'm not recovering from the difference that I'm seeing currently.
Exactly. I love that
So,
you've seen it exactly right. So it starts with thoughts and beliefs,
so in
and
your
for
system, in the base level, that is what you're defining. You're defining how I am functioning as a person, what my priorities are, irrespective of the outside environment. So
well,
you're,
well,
hmm,
that's part of it. I will add one more thing there because it's
please go
important.
ahead. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not just about defining who you are, right? Because that's preparing for the next steps. It's understanding and helping you understand how your thoughts and beliefs are shaping up your entire life,
So
and then
true.
enabling you or empowering you to take control of that system and start to work through exercises, through different things that we do together, to be able to start noticing these patterns in your life, and then asking yourself a simple question: is this pattern going to lead me to an outcome I desire? And most of us, it's going to be no, which means that if it doesn't lead to an outcome you desire, then now you have a choice. Do you do something about it? And that's where the power comes in. Because let's take this example with the email. You sit down to write an email, you wrote it, and now you catch yourself going back. You become aware that, wait a second, I have a thought, maybe I should check this email. That's a thought that you catch yourself with. Well, now you have a choice. It's like, do I allow this to continue? Because I know what's going to happen. I'm going to spend 5 minutes refining this email that was fine to begin with.
Hmm.
So if you catch yourself, then what are you going to do? You're going to interrupt that pattern.
Hmm.
And I have exercises for it. The exercises take very like 10, 15, 20 seconds, right? So immediately you can gain back 3, 4 minutes, multiply that by 20, however times it happens in a day, and you're going to see immediate effects, right, within days and weeks of implementing some of these things. But you may say, you know what? And this is true, by the way, you're not going to catch yourself all the time. Sometimes you have so many things going on, you try to multitask and you don't catch yourself. That's fine. It's not about being perfect. What if you could only catch yourself 5 times out of 20
You
or 5
see,
out of 50? You still got back 25 minutes or 20 minutes and a bit and change, right? You still got back quite a bit of time.
the way you put the structure around the entire thought process, it truly makes me see. I mean, me having a 15-year of software background makes me see how we can also break down everything so logically into blocks with respect to how we behave and how we handle scenario, and bring in different kinds of tools to invoke different kinds of emotions. And that leads me to my next question, where I see follow your heart and love behind you.
Oh, yes, yes, I'm here.
Tell us a little more about it. Was that deliberate, or did it just happen? Or is it always there in your... No, it's always there in your podcasts. I've seen it
Oh,
all.
it is, yes, but this actually, I found them right before I started recording. It's funny, the Follow Your Heart, because I started recording shortly after Valentine's last year in
Mhm.
2023. And I was walking through like one of the dollar stores, and it was way after Valentine's, so sometime in March, and they had some leftover things, and they had a sign, the Follow Your Heart. And I was like, oh, that's perfect, because you see, that's what I started doing in 2023. Once I aligned myself with my why, with my purpose, which is in your heart, it's not up here, it's in your heart. I was like, that makes sense. And what I talk about is following your heart, right? Shine your light, follow your heart. And that's why that's up there. Love, I don't remember what I found it a bit later, but essentially what I've also realized on my path is that the two biggest emotions that people go through are fear and love, right? Darkness and light. So for me, I've realized that if I actively choose to come from a place of love, everything in my life is better. A simple example: you're in traffic, you're driving to work, whatever the case might be, right? Someone cuts you off. Immediately you're presented with a choice. Do you come from a place of love? Do you come from a place of fear? If you come from a place of fear, which is how I did most of my life, you start getting upset, you start cursing, maybe you start honking your horn. Some people take it to the next level where they hurt each other, right? That's there's a lot of stuff going on. And imagine what it does to you and everyone else, right? Like, you get pissed off, it ruins your day, or at least part of it. It doesn't make the other person feel any better anyway. But if you choose to come from a place of love, meaning Maybe you're like, you know what? I don't know. Maybe they're rushing to work. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital. Maybe there's an emergency. You don't know. You shouldn't care, right? And that's what I'm talking about love. That's why it's there, because it's also a reminder for me to check myself and see, am I coming from a place of love or a place of fear? And it's not about perfection, because there's many times in my day or in my week that I catch myself coming from a place of fear, and that's okay. It's, again, human nature. It's not about perfection, which us as high achievers can struggle with at times, because we want everything to be as close to perfect as possible, right? People pride themselves on being a perfectionist, yet there is no such thing as perfection anywhere in nature. And we are part of nature, which means that there's no chance that any single one of us can be perfect.
That's so well put, Constantin. And the way I see love, it just makes me flow through life. It just, I don't know what it does to others, but it definitely calms me down. So why would I really choose to put myself into an acid if I can actually be in a gooey chocolate sauce instead? So
Because of your subconscious mind and all the stories that are not yours, right? Because 95% of the time it's chosen for you. And if you don't train yourself for the positivity, or if you didn't happen to have the right mentors and caregivers when you grew up, and you didn't build these love first programs, a lot of your limiting beliefs and a lot of your thought patterns are unfortunately more in fear than they are in love. And there's another important reason to mention here for most people, is that no matter where you grew up and how you grew up, we all struggle with negativity bias, because that's innate in all human beings, which means that you are more prone to negativity than you are to positivity. So then that means you have to train positivity into your life, right? So no matter how far you are on this journey, there's always room for more positivity, more love, more kindness, less judgment, all the stuff.
important that we all shine, because it's because
Yes.
the sun shines that uh that we have a day, but that doesn't mean that everywhere there is just light for the sun. The sun itself is in darkness. um yeah.
And
Sorry,
I,
that was
I
my
love that you, no, no,
realization. I went
I
all
love
the
that,
way from
because
it. Yeah.
I came up in meditation with this a few weeks ago with an analogy for my system,
Hmm.
especially the one around your why and your gifts and strengths and your foundation. So, from step one to step five, if you look at the sun, right, it's giving away its light freely. It doesn't care who's using the light and the heat that it's giving off, right? And for some planets that are too close, is it bad or is it good? Well, it just is, right? But for us, it happens to be really good that we get the sun. Sometimes, if we stare at the sun, that's not good, right? So there's always this idea of like good and bad. But for the sun to shine its light, for us to receive it, what does it actually have to do? Its core. So the main part of the sun has to be functioning in a certain way, has to be very
Yes.
clear, has to be very strong.
Yes.
Well, that's how I see us as human beings. If our core is not strong enough, then our ability to shine our light is
Will dim.
also suppressed significantly. So if you look at my first four steps, foundation, why, gifts and strengths, and vision, that's your core. If you don't get clear in your core, if you don't build your core strongly, then you're not going to be able to shine your light brightly either.
Wow, that is really a great way to segue into summarizing our session. But before we do that, I would love to understand a bit about your relationships in your life, especially with your family members and dogs, whatever you're comfortable sharing with us. I know it's a
Oh,
new podcast, new audience, so we are all
I'm
strangers
happy
to
to share
you.
anything. Like my relationships since being on this journey have improved tenfold. I've made more friends and close friends, and I've met more amazing people than ever before because of the changes that have been going on. Because I became more vulnerable, more authentic. I became me, and I'm shining my light, which meant that now I didn't have to live in fear or show up in fear. I could show up with me. More love, more compassion, more empathy. So my relationships with my dogs improved. My relationship with my coworkers at Microsoft, with my parents, with strangers, with everyone just skyrocketed. Because what? Because I worked on that core. And that allowed me to then shine my light more, right? And I started my podcast, and I got to meet so many amazing people as a result of it. I mean, you and I met only because I started my podcast. But
Yes.
really, it was only because I went on my own journey and found the four pieces that were for me. And let me tell you something, Sita, which I haven't had a chance to mention. The step one in my process took me years to find because I started with step two and three, and it took me months and months to actually do something with it because my foundation was too weak. So even though I was trying really hard, it kept falling down. So until I realized that step one was actually the most important aspect before I can build anything else, I couldn't actually transform my life
Do you
and go
think
further
it'll
faster.
always take two to like quite a few years? I understand
No,
what you're saying. The soul searching journey does take long, and
absolutely not.
the
Like, look,
developing
I'll
the
give you an
habit to
example.
be uncomfortable, to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, to be comfortable with being with that emotion that is icking somewhere within.
Yeah, I love the question. But no, to answer your question, no, it doesn't have to take that long. So see, there are people in the world that have figured out systems for different things, right? If let's give you an example here. If I want to build a car from the ground up, it's going to take me years, right, to study, to do all the stuff. Or I can just pick up some blueprints, hire a couple of people that know a bit more, and with them I can build something fairly quickly.
Fair.
That's what I found as well. It's like I've
Coaches.
found a system here through my own trials and tribulations, right? Took years. But the clients I'm running through them right now, within 2 to 3 months, they have the entire system implemented and they are transforming that they cannot recognize themselves. And the people around them go like, what's going on? How come, you're doing all of this? And I've had so many clients essentially in, within weeks or even days, see massive changes in how they feel about themselves, about others in the world, and then that gets mirrored externally of you, right? So no, to answer it, absolutely doesn't take more than, let's say, a few weeks to a few months with the right systems. And the trick is, can you find the right system and trust the system to take you to where you want to go, right? Because with my system, if I come to you and say, Sikta, I'm going to coach you for free, I'm going to take the system and going to put you through it. If you don't want to go through something, if you're not ready for a change, it doesn't matter how amazing my system is or any other system, nothing will happen.
The
So that's why it always
willingness.
starts with you.
Hmm,
Yeah.
hmm, hmm. It is a journey inside you. So only if you're ready for the journey can there be someone to help you accelerate. So when you were saying this, yeah, I felt like you're really making many stars shine their brightest on the earth,
Yes.
and they are shining faster than ever before because we have people like you. So may you keep shining your light, and may you shining your light inspire others to do so. This is what Nelson Mandela said. Shine your
Exactly.
light to the brightest so that you give others the permission to do so.
Now let me ask something really quick here, Sikta, because you said something. I mean, you said so many amazing things there. But I remember when this episode goes live. So for those of you listening, a few days after this episode goes live on May 9th, I'm going to be hosting a workshop on exactly my system. It's going to be a 4-hour masterclass. I know for those in Europe, it might be a bit late. We'll fix it in the future. I'll be doing this every 4 to 6 weeks. And the goal of these workshops, you can call them masterclasses, is for me to give away what I know, to shine my light, and empower you to be able to take control of your life. And you come to that for 4 hours, you're going to live inspired, motivated, and empowered with the right approach and tools to take your life to the next level. So if you want to sign up for that or check it out in the future, go to calmsuccesslive.com. And Sikta's going to put it in the show
Yes,
notes too.
we will have it in the description, the link in the description below, as we say it. So please do share that with us, Constantin. I
We
was
will.
anyway going to ask you to share your website and your coaching link, but if you have a workshop, I'm more than happy to share that.
That's the best way for people to get to know me a bit better because we've talked for about an hour here. That's going to be a 4-hour masterclass on how I go deep on every one of these items, and the goal is to, again, like you said, Sikta, is to
Sure.
enable you to shine your light as bright as possible. All right, and
Absolutely. We need it.
that's
We
it.
need it today more than ever before. And
Yes,
yes, we'll get it done together. And this particular episode is being donated to Mission Save a Life, which we are pursuing with Jen. And look forward to many more beautiful interactions on and off camera with you, Constantin.
yes.
Thank you for every time leaving me so much energized after the discussion. I think that's the privilege of talking to people who are shining their light, isn't it? Thank you,
Absolutely,
and
Seita.
all the
Thank you so
best on
much.
your journey ahead. Thank you, audience, for watching us. Look forward to catching up with you. Thank you. Bye. There was quite a few moments when I resonated so much with Constantin and the viewpoints that he brought about. It's always so energizing to speak to people who are driven and have clarity on their life purpose. I hope you and I come more and more in contact with such people and shine a light to the brightest. Do keep living your best life, and we'll catch up with you in the next episode. Thank you. Bye.